When to 4-bet facing a 3-bet. 4-bet logic, not emotion. You do not 4-bet because you are annoyed. You 4-bet because the expected value beats calling or folding. Facing a 3-bet, your job is to build a linear versus polarized ranges plan that survives the pool, the rake drag, and the reality of multi-tabling. 4-betting has two jobs. Take value when villain over continues and generate folds when villain over bluffs. First, value 4-bet, you want calls from worse and you are happy to stack off. Second, re-bluff 4-bet, you leverage blockers and unblockers and fold equity to deny realization. A call is a bet on equity realization. R. If your hand cannot realize well, stop hope calling and either 4-bet or fold. Capped versus uncapped matters. When you only call, your range often becomes capped, and strong regulars will pressure you post-flop. Minimum defense frequency, MDF, is the discipline layer. If you fold too much to 3-bets, you become a tracking software note. TPP Exploit Framework. First, the exploit, 4-bet more versus wide 3-betters. Call less when out of position and realization is poor. Second, the risk. Over 4-betting turns your range into a bluff bucket that gets 5-bet jammed. Third, the counter. When villain starts 5-betting tighter, drop the light 4-bets and increase high R calls in position. Range architecture, linear or polar. Your 4-bet range is not a random list. It is a structure that fits position, stack depth, and villain 3-bet frequency. Linear versus polarized ranges in one sentence. First, linear. You 4-bet your best hands in order, then you stop. Second, polarized, you 4-bet the top for value, then add bluffs with the right blockers. Online pools push you toward polarized 4-bets in many button or cutoff spots. Rake and position make flatting attacks. Out of position, linear becomes more attractive. Calling out of position underperforms because equity realization, R, drops and you face more pressure. First, in position versus a big blind 3-bet, you can call more because you realize equity. Second, out of position versus a button 3-bet, you should 4-bet or fold more often and avoid marginal calls like King-Jack offsuit. TPP Exploit Framework. First, the exploit versus players who 3-bet too much, polarize, add blocker bluffs. Second, the risk. If you polarize versus a nit, your bluffs burn money. Third, the counter. When villain tightens, revert to linear and reduce 4-bet bluffs. Value 4-bets, what you stack off with. A value 4-bet means you profit when villain calls or jams with worse. Your value threshold changes by position and by how wide villain 3-bets and continues. Baseline value 4-bet buckets in many online pools, 100 big blinds effective. First, versus tight 3-bet ranges, value is often pocket queens and better and ace-king. Second, versus wide 3-bet ranges, value expands to pocket tens and better and ace-queen suited and better more often. If villain only continues with pocket jacks and better and ace-king, then 4-betting ace-queen offsuit as value is delusion. You need a bluff or a fold logic, not a call hope. Use capped versus uncapped to protect your post-flop lines. If you never 4-bet, your call range is capped and your checking becomes auto-attacked. TPP Exploit Framework. First, the exploit. 4-bet bigger value ranges versus stations who hate folding to 4-bets. Second, the risk. Over-widening value makes you stack off dominated. Third, the counter. If villain starts overfolding, shift some value hands to calls in position to keep bluffs alive. Re-bluff 4-bets, your money printer. A re-bluff 4-bet is a pre-flop bluff that wins through fold equity and blocker effects. You want hands that block villain continues and that do not mind folding to a 5-bet jam, core bluff candidates. First, A5s, A2s, high-quality blockers and unblockers, suits add backdoor playability when called. Second, King 10 suited through King 9 suited in some formations blocks ace. King and pocket kings continues, still has some equity. Third, Queen 10 suited and Jack 10 suited sometimes, mainly in position, when villain 3-bet is wide and folds enough. Hands to stop using as re-bluffs. First, 8-7 suited out of position, it has no relevant blockers and relies on post-flop realization. Second, pocket fours without the right price, set mining versus a 3-bet is hope poker in rake-heavy pools. Third, King-Jack offsuit out of position, dominated and low equity realization. R. Your bluff 4-bet range must be consistent with minimum defense frequency. MDF. If you fold too much and never fight back, villain prints by 3 betting any 2. TPP exploit framework. First, the exploit. Add A5s, A2s, 4 bets versus high 3-bet, high fold to 4-bet profiles in tracking software. Second, the risk. Overusing suited wheel aces makes you predictable and vulnerable to 5-bet jams. Third, the counter. If villain starts jamming wider, tighten the bluff bucket and call more with hands that realize in position. Sizing, the part most players misplay. Your 4-bet sizing controls fold equity and stack to pot ratio. Make it consistent, not emotional. First, in position, size to about 2.1x to 2.3x the 3-bet. Second, out of position, size to about 2.4x to 2.7x the 3-bet. If stacks go in too easily, you used a sizing that is too large for your bluff density. If villain peels everything, you used a sizing that is too small. When you multi-table, standardize your sizings. You reduce mistakes and you reduce exploitability. TPP exploit framework. First, the exploit. Go slightly larger out of position versus sticky callers to deny realization. Second, the risk. Oversizing forces you to overcommit marginal value hands. Third, the counter. If villain adjusts by folding too much, keep size and increase bluffs with correct blockers. In position baseline, button or cutoff versus big blind, 3-bet. This is your most common online formation. You open, big blind 3 bets. You have position and better realization. First, call more suited hands with playable realization like 8-7 suited, when the 3-bet is not massive and villain is not a post-flop tyrant. Second, 4-bet more blocker bluffs like A5s, A2s when big blind over 3 bets and overfolds to 4 bets. Third, fold more offsuit broadways like King-Jack offsuit. They look pretty and realize badly versus a tight range. Capped versus uncapped lens. If you only call in position, you can still be uncapped if you trap some premiums. If your pool never traps, your call range becomes capped by default. Scenario box. Hero hand, Ace of Spades, 5 of Spades, flop, King of Clubs, 7 of Hearts, 2 of Spades. Action, cutoff opens, big blind, 3 bets, cutoff, 4 bets, big blind calls, flop checks to cutoff. With Ace of Spades, 5 of Spades, you blocked some. Ace-King continues and you have backdoor equity. On this flop, your C-bet is about range leverage. You rep, pocket aces, pocket kings, ace-king, and you deny equity to hands like Queen-Jack suited. TPP exploit framework. First, the exploit. Against big blinds who overfold post-flop in 4-bet pots. C-bet small and print. Second, the risk. Auto C-betting gets punished by check jam ranges on dynamic boards. Third, the counter. If big blind starts check jamming, tighten your bluffs and check back more of your air. Out of position advanced, small blind or big blind, facing a button, 3, bet. Out of position is where players hemorrhage. Your realization is lower and the pot is inflated. First, 4-bet more of your playable top end. You deny in position realization and avoid guessing. Second, call less with medium offsuit hands like King-Jack offsuit. They get dominated and squeezed by rake. Third, do not set mine pocket fours unless stack depth and sizing give true implied odds. Most online 3 bets do not. Your out-of-position bluff 4 bets must be higher quality. Prefer A5s, A2s over suited connectors like 8-7 suited. that is blockers and unblockers plus reduced reverse implied odds. Minimum defense frequency, MDF, out of position does not mean defend trash. It means defend with hands that can realize and with actions that do not leak. Expected value. TPP exploit framework. First, the exploit versus button. 3 bettors who barrel too much, 4-bet more, and force them into 5-bet mistakes. Second, the risk. If you 4-bet too linear out of position, your range becomes face up and you lose action with value. Third, the counter. Add a small polarized bluff bucket with A5s, A2s so villain cannot overfold pre-flop. Decision checklist, your fast multi-table system. This is how you decide in real time without timing out. First, range. Is villain capped versus uncapped when they 3-bet from this seat? Second, fold equity. Do they overfold to 4 bets in tracking software? Third, realization. If you call, is your equity realization R, high or low? Fourth, structure. Should your response be linear versus polarized ranges? Fifth, defense. Are you meeting minimum defense frequency, MDF, without defending garbage? Sixth, blocks. Do you have premium blockers and unblockers for a re-bluff? TPP exploit framework. First, the exploit. Build a default 4-bet bluff set. Execute it fast, adjust by pool tendencies. Second, the risk. Robotic execution ignores player type and burns expected value versus tight 3-betters. Third, the counter. When you detect a tight 3-bet range, remove bluffs, call more in position, and overfold out of position. Key takeaway. You 4-bet for 2 reasons. Value versus over-continues and re-bluff versus overfolds. Use linear versus polarized ranges based on position. Protect your expected value with equity realization. R. Enforce discipline with minimum defense frequency, MDF, and select bluffs using blockers and unblockers while tracking who is capped versus uncapped. Now, let's test your edge. Question 1. What are the 2 core jobs of a 4-bet according to the article? Answer. Take value when villain over continues and generate folds when villain over bluffs and overfolds. Explanation. The article frames 4-betting as either value, getting called by worse, or re-bluffing, using fold equity and blockers to win pre-flop. Question 2. In 1 sentence each, what is the difference between a linear and a polarized 4-bet range? Answer. Linear. 4-bet your best hands in order, then stop. Polarized. 4-bet the top for value, then add bluffs with the right blockers. Explanation. The article defines range architecture as either value-heavy, linear, or value plus selected blocker bluffs, polarized. Question 3. What baseline value 4-bet buckets does the article give for 100 big blinds? Effective stacks versus tight versus wide 3-bet ranges. Answer. Versus tight, pocket queens and better and ace-king. Versus wide often expands to pocket 10s and better and ace-queen suited and better. Explanation. The value threshold widens when villain 3-bets and continues wider and tightens when villain's continues are narrow. Question 4. What 4-bet sizing does the article recommend in position versus out of position, Answer. In position, about 2.1x to 2.3x the 3-bet. Out of position, about 2.4x to 2.7x the 3-bet. Explanation. The recommended sizes are larger, out of position, to manage fold equity and stack to pot ratio when you will realize equity worse and face more pressure. Question 5. Name 1 hand group the article recommends as core re-bluff 4-bet candidates and 1 hand it says to stop using as a re-bluff, especially out of position. Answer. Candidates A5s, A2s. Stop using 8-7 suited out of position or pocket 4s without the right price, or King-Jack offsuit out of position. Explanation. The article prefers blocker-driven bluffs like suited wheel aces and warns against bluffs that rely on post-flop realization or are dominated when called. Study hard, play smart. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next lesson.